All right, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the March 2021 session of the Richmond Art Gallery's Artist Salon series. My name is Kathy Tykolis. I am the Richmond Art Gallery's Education and Public Programs Coordinator. I am the host of the Artist Salon series, and I am really happy and privileged to bring you our guest artist today, Sandeep Johal. So welcome to the Artist Salon, Sandeep. And I want to also welcome all of you who are joining our live stream today, and thank you for supporting the Richmond Art Gallery's public programs. With my fancy slideshow. Next slide. So for those of you who are new to the program, the Artist Salon is a monthly series of talks. It happens the last Saturday of every month at 1 o'clock from February to November. We offer a mix of professional development tips and inspiration for visual artists to keep on making and growing your art practice. This session, as all our sessions from the past year, are being recorded, and they will be available for viewing at a later date, along with English transcription at the Richmond Art Gallery's Rag at Home pages of the richmondartgallery.org website. And we also include them on our Richmond Art Gallery YouTube channel. We will include any links that might be mentioned today. We will include those on the YouTube channel description. Just in case you miss writing anything down today, we will include those later as well. And in connection to resources for artists, I also want to mention that I do manage the Artist Salon Facebook group. This is a private group just for artists, mostly in the Lower Mainland, where we post regularly about artist calls, professional development opportunities, local arts events. But it is also a space for you artists to connect with one another. So you can find out about the Facebook group just by going to our website. And I wanted to just introduce our lovely guest today, which I'm so happy to have her with us today. So you may know Sandeep as an artist who does really intricate fine line drawings, or as a painter, or as a collage artist, or as a muralist. We have posted her bio in the chat so you can see some of the places where you might have seen her work. And for those of you today who are new to Sandeep's work, please note there will be discussion of violence against women, rape, and murder. So please, take care of yourself. Consider that this will be part of the subject matter today. And in terms of how we got Sandeep onto the Artist Salon, I met Sandeep a few years ago. I invited her to host a drink and draw at the gallery back in the days when we used to have live in-person events. But I was following her on social media for quite a few years before that. And in particular, I started noticing her name and her art popping up a lot in my neighborhood of Mount Pleasant in Vancouver. So as a fan following her on social media for a while, I was really inspired to just see how her artistic voice was developing. And in particular, the last few years, how her career has really just taken off, at least as an outsider viewing in from Instagram. So I thought she would be a really great inspiration for our Artist Salon audience of artists. She really embodies that commitment and hard work it takes to, first of all, find your style. And then secondly, just to get your work out there, out in the world, and committing to that life of working as a full-time artist. Also, I knew her a little bit from her background as one of the Thrive Art Studios members and mentors. So I knew she would bring you all some really honest insight and advice to our audience of artists. So artists, I just want to let you know, get ready for some great tips and some inspiration. Sandeep, I am really happy to have you here today. So welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for all the kind words. Thank you, Richmond Art Gallery, for hosting. And thank you to everyone who's joining us on this weekend afternoon. I appreciate your time. So I'm gonna just talk about sort of my career as an artist and throw in some tips and tricks. And then there'll be a Q&A at the end. So honestly, any questions you have, just feel free to write them into the chat and we can discuss them at the end of the talk.
Great, so I'm just going to disappear. I will start your slides and you can just let me know when you want the next slide forwarded.
Yeah, so again, thank you for joining me. I just thought I'd start off with sharing a little bit about what I do. I'm a visual artist and muralist. I primarily work in drawing, collage, large-scale painting, and now textiles, which is a new to me medium. And I've been working professionally for about 5 years. since the birth of my son. So I'll be talking about that later as well. Next slide. So I grew up in a small town in the Okanagan, and my parents immigrated from India to Canada in the early 70s. So, you know, they were new immigrants to a foreign place. They didn't have the language, the finances, didn't really know what resources were available to them. And so, you know, for me growing up, really embracing art and really spending a lot of time making and creating, they didn't really know how to support me in that. They didn't stop me, but they didn't know how to support me in it. And so, you know, in my culture, there's these 5 pre-approved professions: doctor, dentist, lawyer, engineer, and pharmacist. And I had no interest in any of those in any way, shape, or form. In my heart, I knew that there was this artist, but I didn't know how to articulate it. And I didn't have any role models within my South Asian community to show me that that was even a possibility, because I grew up pre-internet, so I didn't have access the way the younger generation has access now globally. And so I just kind of, you know, kept making art, kept thinking about, you know, what I wanted to do with my life. And I ended up doing a biology degree. With my mom was hoping I'd become a doctor, but I axed that pretty quickly. And then after that, I did an education degree, and still didn't really feel that fulfilled in what I was doing. And so I always come back to this quote that I have in the top right corner about parenting the child you have, not the child you wish you had. And I think, you know, that generation had an idea of what they wanted their kids to be and who they wanted them to be, and parented from that point of view. And things have shifted now, where I feel like we're really focusing in on our children's unique gifts. And so for me as a mother, I'm always thinking about, you know, what are my child's unique gifts and how can I support him in developing those gifts? Because, you know, I didn't have that support growing up. And then how do I show him he can find success using his gifts? Because I've later in life found success using mine. So it's an interesting place to be in, you know, thinking about my childhood and the expectations that were placed on me and how I'd like to raise my son without limits, and really just a lot of possibilities. Next slide. So I call this deathbed regrets, because that is kind of what propelled me to go to art school. I was sitting there thinking one day, you know, what if I'm on my deathbed and I never went to art school, or I never gave this a shot? Would I regret it? And it was this resounding yes, I will regret this. And so I applied to art school in 2005 when I was almost 30 years old, and was one of the oldest students in the class, but as you can see, like, not the maturest. And it was, you know, that moment I walked into Langara, into those studios, I felt that feeling of like, this is where I'm meant to be and this is what I'm meant to do. I had never had that feeling in my life ever. And, you know, my intention was just to do 1 year, just to check it off my bucket list. And then I ended up doing the 2-year diploma program, graduated with honors, received the design award. I really excelled at it because it was what I wanted to do. And I'd been waiting so long to do it that I took it really seriously. Next slide. There we go. So if you're familiar with my work and you look at this work, you're going to see a pretty big difference. And again, you should, because your work should evolve over the years, and your style and your voice, it changes. But in these works, you can still see my line work and that sort of meticulous detail. So I have examples of works I did in printmaking. This painting, that's the circular mandala painting. It's an 8-foot by 8-foot painting made out of 7 panels. I have a mandala labyrinth that I did for my sculpture class, and then the dysfunctional meditation bench. And you know, like when I went to art school, I didn't really know what kind of work I wanted to make. I didn't really have like a distinct voice. And so, you know, over those 2 years, I realized that I really enjoyed printmaking and I really enjoyed design. Drawing and painting were actually my worst classes. And that's what I do most of now, which is interesting. But, you know, looking back at this, I kind of like cringe a little bit because I'm like, ugh, but, you know, it's a good reminder of how your voice takes shape and evolves as you evolve as a human being, an artist. Next. So when I was at art school, we had to do this series in our printmaking class where we had to create 3 prints, and each print had to include 1 image from the previous print so that they were connected visually. And around that time, I had started reading all these headlines about honor killings in the Lower Mainland and in BC, and I was so shocked because I thought, this doesn't happen here, this happens somewhere else. But it does happen here. And it was happening quite a bit. And so I really wanted to do something around that. I wanted to, you know, talk about these young women and highlight their lives and their stories and keep their memories alive. And so I created this series called When Honor Kills. And it was dedicated to, the first one on the left is dedicated to Jaswinder Sidhu from Maple Ridge, whose mother and uncle ordered her execution in India, and for no reason other than marrying a low-caste rickshaw driver without their consent. And then the middle print is dedicated to Amandeep Otwal from Kitimat. Her father stabbed her to death several times because she had moved out with her boyfriend who was non-Indian. And the third print, there's some text that says, is it, what is it? And is it means honor in my language. And it's just questioning that notion of honor that's so strong. Families are willing to kill their female relatives over it, not their male relatives, but their female relatives. And so I really wanted to talk about this. I really wanted to bring it to people's attention. And as you can imagine, during the crit, I was so nervous to share this work with my classmates and my instructor. And I thought, well, will anyone even care? Is it too personal? Will I show my culture in a negative light? But it was exactly the opposite. My instructor, from that day forward, I've kept this in my mind. He had talked about how I'd taken this really ugly topic and I talked about it in this really beautifully aesthetic way, in this palatable way. You know, I was able to draw people into these stories without, you know, hitting them on the head. And I just included a quote from my instructor years later. He had sent me this message, and I just, again, really love the way that he perceived my work, because that's how I approach my work now. And I'll just read it to you. It says, one of the many elements that I like in your work is that there is a deliberate decorative component, which you acknowledge in your writing / speaking, but it functions very subtly as another example of the word drawing, in that it draws the viewer further into your work, where they may discover what lies beneath, or rather interwoven with the seemingly decorative elements. This was apparent in your series of small screen prints years ago, and is still amazingly apparent in your huge murals. That is not easy to accomplish. And, you know, it's just such a huge part of my work to be able to talk about these really uncomfortable topics, but to do it in a way that's subtle and leaves the viewer interested and perhaps wanting more. Next slide. So after art school, I was like, watch out world, I'm gonna be an artist. And spoiler, no, you're not. So this is my fantasy of what I thought it was gonna be like, and that dumpster fire is the reality of what it was. So I spent, I think, 6 to 8 months trying to be an artist, and I failed miserably. And it was because I didn't know how to be an artist. I didn't understand that being an artist is a business. I didn't understand how to market my work. And I didn't have a network. And so without those 3 things, it's really hard to run an art business. And I ended up broke, you know, just like hustling to pay my rent. I was stressed out all the time. And I just felt really deflated. You know, I just had this really incredible experience at art school. I'd done really well. I felt really motivated, but out in the real world, I just didn't know how to do it. And for me, I'm a firm believer that timing is everything. And so I'm actually happy that it didn't happen then, because I think it was meant to happen now at this point in my life. Next slide. So from after art school until, really 2016, so almost 10 years, I call it the lost decade of art, because I really wasn't making much art. I was kind of dabbling. I was doing a little bit of painting here and there, a bit of drawing, but nothing really consistent and nothing really serious. But during that decade, I ended up getting a day job with really good benefits. I wanted to pay off my student loan debt. I wanted to save money. I met my husband, I got married, and I had my son. So, personally, those 10 years were quite good, but professionally, I didn't do anything really fulfilling or worthwhile in terms of art. And I have in red underneath, those things that I really struggled with. And, obviously I still struggle with, but, that harsh inner critic that we all have that just tells you your work sucks and you can't do it and you can't make it. The imposter syndrome, like, who am I to say that I'm an artist? Like, how dare I say that out loud? That lack of confidence, feeling like you don't have anything to put out there and it's not good enough and no one will like it. And just that fear of taking that leap, because that starving artist myth has been so ingrained in us, and all those jokes people make about starving artists. It's changed. That narrative has changed now. We're seeing artists becoming very successful. And with the advent of technology and all of these social media platforms, we have more agency and control over our practices and our businesses. And so, it took some time for me to really work through all of those, and I'm still working through some of them. But I'm certainly not allowing those to stop me anymore. Next slide. And it was, I think in 2013, my husband really pushed me to start doing art again and, make a website and just start, putting things out there. And this quote by Brene Brown really resonated with me. And it talks about how unused creativity is not benign, it metastasizes. And that's how I was feeling. I had all of this creative energy inside of me, and I wasn't accessing it, or I wasn't accessing it in the way that I wanted to. And I was full of grief and rage and just judgment and sorrow and shame. I was in this place where I was like, I want to change my life, but I don't know how to do it. And just those ideas of, like, I watched my son every day. He's drawing, he's coloring, he's dancing, he's singing, he's doing all kinds of creative things. And so, we are by nature creative, but it does get lost along the way, and it does get shamed out of us, and it comes back to those ideas around, the starving artist myth, when people just kind of laugh at you when you have these ideas around having a creative career. Next slide. So I did get back into it in 2014, I want to say. And these are just some, like, kind of random festivals and opportunities where I was really into doing mandalas. So people are like, can you do like a chalk mandala? Can you do like this mandala for this event? And then other people will draw one beside it. And, like, I had to start somewhere. I put my work up in a coffee shop. That exposure, we have to be careful with exposure, because oftentimes people will exploit artists with the lure of exposure, but exposure bucks don't pay your rent. So just remember that. So you have to be careful in the ways that you expose your work, and, make sure that you're not being taken advantage of. But having said that, just having your work at home, under your bed is not serving you. You need your work out in the world so that eyes can see it. and you never know where that's going to lead. And I mean, that's the beauty of it. The more places you have your work up, the more people it can reach and access, and something can come of it. So, you know, pay your dues, but know your worth, and always trust your gut. If you feel like a situation doesn't feel like it's on the up and up, or you feel like you're being exploited, you have the power to say no. And I really want to emphasize that as artists, you have the power to say no. Next slide. So in 2014, I started doing on the left all of these really intricate mandala drawings, and it was just kind of like, I should start with what I know, and I know lines. I love lines. I love the possibility of a line. It's just endless, and it's so second nature to me. And so I just started making these. I started posting them online, and then friends and family started buying them. I made prints. I started selling them. And then after I had my son, I wanted to kind of keep the momentum going. So I made a coloring book, and people snapped that up pretty quickly. So, you know, it's great to create work and then just sort of send it out to your friends and family at the beginning and see if, you know, anyone's interested, because friends and family are very supportive and they do want to help you. And I found that, you know, when I was starting out again, people were like, finally, you're doing this art thing. And so that gave me the confidence to just, you know, keep going, and it kept me motivated. So, you know, if you are starting again or fresh to art, just start with what you know, and, you know, it'll evolve from there. Next slide. So in 2015, we had our son, and I was kind of like, oh, I'm just starting my art again, and now I have a kid, and how am I going to do this? And so we were planning to have a child, and I wanted to make sure that financially it would be okay. So I made sure that we had saved, that we didn't have any debt, so that it would be less stressful. And you know, that is really important if you are considering leaving a part-time or full-time job to pursue your art practice. Make sure that you have savings. Don't leave your day jobs until you have enough savings to live off of. And if you are trying to build clientele, start that during the process. So build clientele while you still have a job, so that when you leave, you'll have some clients that you're working with. It just takes that stress and that pressure off. So in 2016, my mat leave was going to end in the spring, but I took an additional 6 months unpaid to see what it would be like to live in Vancouver on my husband's salary. And, you know, it was tight, but my husband is awesome. And he basically said that he would feel more comfortable if I was home with Safa, and then I could pursue my art professionally. And so it was that like moment of fear, like I'm finally having this opportunity to do this thing I've been wanting to do, and I have somebody supporting me in this. I have to do it. But there was so much fear around it, fear around failure, fear around, you know, letting my husband down, fear around, you know, like the dream being burst because maybe I wasn't that good at art. But I said yes. I worked through the fear. I walked through the fear, and I left my job officially in October 2016. And you know, I didn't look at my son as a barrier to my life. I looked at him as an enhancement and as a motivation to find my purpose. You know, because I believe that if I'm a fulfilled person, if I'm a fulfilled mother, I can be a fulfilled person. And if I'm a fulfilled person, I can be a better mother. And I could model for my son that he can also create a career that's outside of the box, you know, something that aligns with his passions. Next slide. So I didn't have childcare. It's very expensive here, and I don't have family here. So my only option was to take my son with me everywhere I went. And, you know, I didn't have a choice to accommodate to the art world. So I made the art world accommodate to me. And, you know, I firmly believe that we have to make space for artists who are parents and, you know, allow children to experience art in meaningful ways. in ways that aren't just directed to kids. And so you see a bunch of photos here of my son out on errands. Over the last 6 years, he's been to, every art store. He's best buds with my framer. He knows everyone at Deluxe Paints. And so, they've seen him grow as my career grows as well, which has been really cool. I birthed my son and my career at the same time. And, so for me, they're inextricably linked. I can't have one without the other. And I don't think I would have one without the other. If my son hadn't been born, I probably would have just been at my job. And I don't think I would have had that opportunity, that motivation to quit my job. So I'm, even though it's hard being a mom, I'm very thankful that I am. And so next slide. So this is so important for artists. What is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you making what you're making? Why should people care about it? Why do you care about it? So really understanding your why is so important. And, for me, this title says it all. Artist tackles misogyny through images. That is what my work is about. I've always had a really strong sense of justice and fairness, but growing up in a South Asian household, in a South Asian community, there wasn't a lot of room for me to express my opinions, especially when it came to the unfair treatment of girls and women. And, I felt like I was shut down and no one really took me seriously. And that brought out a lot of anger. And you might wonder, what role anger plays in the creative process. And in mine, it plays a big one. I found my voice through anger, and I use it to tell the stories of women. And many women who can no longer speak for themselves due to femicide. And, I love this quote by Arundhati Roy. She says, "There's really no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard." And it's really, that's so true, in so many ways, women their voices have been minimized and silenced on purpose, and I want to amplify those voices through my work. So instead of pushing the anger away, I embraced it, and I used it to push harder. I used it to create the work that mattered to me. And within these past 5 years, I've been able to really channel it into something so positive and so constructive. Next slide. And the other thing besides, like, what's your why, is what's your voice? Finding your voice. That's one of the most difficult things you can do as an artist, is find your voice and your distinct style. So in the pink bubbles, I have, different things that have influenced my voice. Obviously, my South Asian heritage. It's really important for me to bring that into my work because I pushed my identity away when I was growing up. I ran away from my identity because I felt embarrassed by it. I felt ashamed by it. And now I feel ashamed that I felt that way. And so I want to bring my heritage into my work. I want people to look at my work and know that it's been made by a South Asian hand, because I am very proud of my heritage. Anything to do with women, I've told so many stories about women. So that's formed a backbone of my work. I love folk art. I love that style and that craftsmanship. And then obviously, pattern, color, and line, those come into my work a lot. And so how I really honed in on my voice was, I spent about a year almost every night sitting at my table and drawing for no purpose, just drawing for the sake of drawing. And the more I drew, the more I noticed these sort of repetitive elements would show up, these repeated motifs, patterns, whether they're geometric or floral. They started to grow into this visual vocab. And so that only happened by showing up for myself. I made a commitment to show up for myself. I made a commitment to carve out time to create, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour. It's so important to just try to create a little bit of time every day just to make work. And it doesn't have to be a masterpiece. I have so many drawings that are just junk. And out of those piles of junk, I find 1 or 2 gems that I run with. So it's really just getting into that practice, you know, and really flexing that muscle. So again, practice, practice, practice. That's the only way you can get better, and really focus on the process, not the outcome. Because often we're so outcome driven. We get frustrated with the process, but the process is how we find our voice. And so, yeah, just really, really spend time with yourself and make time to just make work for the sake of making work, and your voice will come. And never copy anyone's work. Sometimes it can be alluring to like try to draw like somebody else or make work like somebody else, but make sure that you stay away from flat out copying someone's work, because that is never okay. Next slide. So this one, I just wanted to share, you don't need a reason to make stuff, just make stuff. I drew this drawing at the beginning of the pandemic last year with no reason in mind. I just drew it. And then it ended up being in an auction for the BC Women's Health Foundation. And then from that image, I decided I wanted to make a collage of the tiger. So then I made a collage of the tiger, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. So then I made several collages of different animals. And then those animals, 6 of them, ended up in this project with Earl's Restaurant in Langley, Grandview Corners. And then the rest of them, the originals, I've been selling them at Art Rental and Sales. So had I not done that one drawing, I probably wouldn't have made this collage, and it wouldn't have ended up in Earl's, and I wouldn't have ended up selling them at Art Rental and Sales. So it's like you never know where something's going to take you. So just do it, just create. Next. And also make the work you want to make, like let your freak flag fly. I've been making these beast women. I was like, they're really weird. Probably no one will buy them or like them. I sold all of my beast drawing studies really quickly. The 2-headed beast lady was at a show for Art Rapture, and I was like, there was no way someone is going to buy this. It's too weird. Someone did. And then from these, I've been making these beast collages. And so it's like, you don't know, like you'll find your niche audience, you know, but be authentic and make the work you want to make, not the work you think you should make. You know, things are trendy. You know, I know there's people out there who are making work that's trendy and it sells because it's trendy, but you know, what happens when the trend dies? You know, so really like look inside, think about the work that really matters to you, the work you want to make, and just make it and see what happens. Next slide. So in 2016, I had the good fortune of meeting Jamie Smith, who is a local artist, and she created Thrive Art Studio for female artists and female identifying artists as a way to build community and support. So I was a member of Thrive and a facilitator for 3 years, and it absolutely started my career. I didn't know anything about art as a business. I learned so much from Jamie in terms of how to run your practice as a business. I met so many other artists. I had access to resources and opportunities I hadn't had access to. So, you know, Thrive Art Studio was just so important to me at the beginning of my career. And, you know, I just appreciate the work Jamie's doing so much. Right now, she's running an online platform that you can join. I think it's $25 US a month, and you have access to so many resources, so many artists. It's really quite amazing. Next slide. So then that same year, I met my art consultant, the magical unicorn of the art world that is Penny Lane of Dazed and Confucius Art Consulting. I had really nothing to show her. This is a photo from my consult with her. I was making like very geometric work. And during the consult, Penny Lane just looked at me and asked me, like, what are you passionate about, Sandeep? Like, what do you care about? And I was like, oh, I care about women and justice. And then I just started crying. And she was like, that's what you need to do. And so she brought me back to the work that was meaningful. And she set me on that path again. And I'm so eternally grateful to her for that. And, you know, her knowledge and expertise and insight and care has been so instrumental to my practice over the 5 years. I consult with her regularly, and it's really leveled up my practice. Next slide. So this is my practice. I'm probably going to talk a bit quicker because I'm seeing the time. I have a very sort of multifaceted practice. I do murals, talks, workshops, public art, juries, illustration, licensing, residencies. I do sell original works in print sometimes. I do exhibitions, solo and group, and commissions sometimes. But really, think about who you are as a person and who you are as an artist. Murals aren't for everybody. You know, I know they're really hot right now, but if you don't want to paint a mural, you don't have to paint a mural. If you love giving talks, then maybe that's something you can do. If you don't like giving talks, don't give talks. You know, I feel like people think they need to do all the things. You don't have to do all the things. Think about what works for you as your personality, and like what works for you with the personality you have, and what works for you with the kind of art you make. I personally, I have a strong like solo exhibition practice because that's when I get to make personal work that's really meaningful for me. Mural work funds a lot of my practice. And, you know, I've started looking into residencies more as well, which I'll talk about later. But, you know, really think about who you are and how all of this fits into yourself and your practice. Next slide. So I just want to go over a couple of shows that I had done. So this is Rest in Power. It was my first solo show in 2017. The painting I had done for a group show with Thrive Art Studio, and it was my first time painting this goddess form that was inspired by Shauna Singh Baldwin's novel, The Selector of Souls. And my intention was to just make like 12 of these mini paintings of these goddesses. But then during October, there's this thing called Inktober, and every day you do an ink drawing. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll do like a goddess drawing every day, and then I'll turn those into paintings. Those will be my studies that I'll turn into paintings. But around that time, Natsumi Kogawa, an international student from Japan, was found murdered in Vancouver. And it really hit me hard. I used to teach international students. I lived in Japan for 2 years. And I was really horrified by what happened to her. And so I posted this first drawing in honor of Natsumi Kogawa. And I just hashtagged it, you know, Rest in Power. And it got such a beautiful response from people. I thought, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll create these drawings specifically for women who've been murdered. And that's how Rest in Power evolved. And then Julia from the GAM Gallery saw them on Instagram and offered me my first solo show in 2017. Next slide. So during my residency at the Anvil Center in New West, I took the drawing studies and then I redrew them to that image you see in the center. And then I redrew that with proper ink on proper paper and added bits of collage. So you can see how that has progressed from the initial drawing study to the final drawing with collage. And I am primarily analog, so I do things slowly but meticulously, and it takes me a while, but I do like the labor of really working with my hands. So this is all analog. Next slide. So I had the show. It was incredible. The turnout was incredible. People were very visibly moved by the work. And I just felt like, yes, like this is what I want to do. I want to take these horrible topics and I want to present them in these really beautifully aesthetic ways, and really honor these women and keep their legacies alive, and, you know, share their stories and share, you know, keep their memories here with us as, you know, we fight to change how women are treated in this world. And it was such a powerful show. I felt really proud that I was able to produce this work. Next slide. So these are some paintings from the show that were inspired by Shauna Singh Baldwin's novel, The Selector of Souls, because in that novel, she deals with like femicide, infanticide, rape, murder, domestic abuse, all of these topics. And, you know, I love the way she writes about these horrible things in this really beautiful prose. And that's what I aim to do with my work. And then in 2020, I was on a panel with Shauna Singh Baldwin, which was amazing. This woman whose novel I've read so many times and inspired my show. I was finally able to meet her and have a dialogue with her, which was just incredible. Next slide. And then Rest in Power got a ton of press, which really helped my career a lot. You know, a lot of different venues where a lot of different media were advertising the show, wrote about the show. And again, you know, the power of press to support your new career is pretty amazing. Next slide. So this one, Rest in Power, went to Montreal, 6 drawings in 2019 as part of Invisible Bodies Reflective Site, which was a group show. And it was through the Visual Arts Center and McClure Gallery in partnership with Impacts Project. And I was really honored to be a part of this because Impacts is a project led by Dr. Shaheen Sharif, and she's a faculty member at McGill University. And it's a 7-year project that is addressing sexual violence on university campuses in Canada and internationally. And, you know, I'll just read you what it says. The overarching goal of this project is to unearth, dismantle, and prevent sexual violence within universities and ultimately in society through evidence-based research that will inform sustainable curriculum and policy change. So to have my work as part of that, it just felt really incredible, and you know, just really affirmed that you can make change through art, which is always what I'm trying to do. Next slide. She Left Only to Come Back. This was my second solo show at Art Rental and Sales, operated by the Vancouver Art Gallery. This one, I was looking at books by Indian authors and sharing the stories of the female protagonists through objects and environments, and really looking at female suffering and the endurance of that suffering through the strength and resilience of these characters, these main characters. So it was a bit of a different take. I hadn't done, you know, text in my work and like really sort of graphic object work. So it was an interesting departure for me. Next slide. So I am represented by the Art Rental and Sales program since 2018, and it's been really incredible working with Isabella, Jazz, and Zoe. They've sold so much of my work. They have a call out right now. I think it's still open. So I just want to talk about representation. You know, you can sell your work directly to your clients. I see people doing that on Instagram where they do releases of their work throughout the year. People often will work with interior designers to create work for, you know, interior spaces. You can show your work through artist-run centers and be paid a CARFAC fee. You can show your work through public galleries and institutions and get paid a CARFAC fee. Art Rental and Sales is a 40-60 split. So you can also, you know, join different art rental and sales programs. And then there's the commercial gallery side of it as well. So you can be represented by a commercial gallery, which is a 50-50 split. So again, you have to decide what resonates with your work and how you want to show your work. For me, I love working with artist-run centers and public galleries and institutions because I get to create the work that I want to create, and I get to experiment in a way that I wouldn't be able to say with a commercial gallery. But having said that, there are commercial galleries out there who are very experimental. Next slide. So this was my first public work I did in 2016, and it was a planter in Strathcona. And for this, I just want to mention that this was my original design in the top left corner. And when you apply to something, even if you're not happy with your design, or maybe you don't think it's a great design, they might look at it and be like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then look at the rest of your work and look at your portfolio and see other work you've done, and then come back to you with, actually, can you do this style? So I'm just putting that out there, that sometimes, you know, the thing that you apply with isn't the thing you end up doing, because maybe a different style of yours is a better fit. So keep that in mind. Next slide. So this was my first interior mural I did through the Thrive Art Studio mural residency program. At that time, they were giving us space to paint murals. It was very low risk. It was a controlled environment, and there was tons of on-site support. So I just projected a drawing I had done just to practice, you know, painting on a wall and seeing what that would feel like. Next slide. And these are examples of my mural sketches. So again, I am analog, and for my murals, I don't project or grid, so everything is eyeballed. I have a pretty good sense of space, so for me, it's easy to just kind of figure out where things go. but I did get an iPad, and now I'm doing mock-ups in Procreate, which is much quicker and much easier. But again, don't let being analog stop you from making things. Next slide. So this was my first outdoor mural with Van Mural Fest, and I learned a ton about how to paint a mural. I got tons of press. Again, you know, Van Mural Fest has been such a huge part of my career. I've done several projects with them, and they've been a constant source of support. And so, you know, really these careers that we have are so much around relationship building and community building. So much of my work comes to me through the relationships that I've made with people. And so it's really important that when you do work with people, you are a professional, you deliver a high quality product, and that you're flexible and reliable, because it does come back. It does come back to you. Sorry, my throat is dry. So, you know, networking is very important. This is, yes, so in my murals, I paint a lot of women. And I never used to draw women. I used to just draw shapes and patterns. And then when I started drawing consistently, I began drawing women, which was new for me. And these women started finding their ways into my murals. And I began asking myself, like, who are these women? Are they me? Are they self-portraits? Am I rewriting the narrative to include myself? You know, and as my art practice has evolved, so have my murals. They're no longer these sort of flat folk art characters that look a bit sad. These women are now more realistic. There's more movement and more confidence. And I wonder if that's a reflection of where I'm at as an artist and as a woman in my life. You know, as women, we're often taught to shrink, but these women on my walls are taking up space in the public realm. And I hope it encourages women to do the same, you know, in everyday life, to be unafraid and unashamed and be visible. Next slide. So this one, I wanted to show you what can happen when you just do something for the heck of it. So this first mural, this pink one, there was a Thrive Art Studio show at Kafka's. It was a group show, and I asked Michael if I could paint this mural on the back wall. So I just did it for free, just to do it, just for extra practice. Someone went to the show to see their friend's work, saw my mural, pitched my work to a corporate project for a hotel. And so at the bottom, you'll see this long piece. That was my first corporate mural. And then from that mural, I'm now working with that same company again this year to do 3 murals. And the gentleman that was in charge of that project is now a co-owner in a restaurant. So then he commissioned me to do these murals. So everything is connected. You never know when one thing will lead to another and when you're going to work with someone again. So just, it's really important to just put your work out there. And sometimes it's good to do free stuff, you know, as long as you feel good about it. All right, next slide. So this is a mural project I did with Lululemon in West Vancouver. And it was interesting because with corporate murals, you have to really think about, how do I retain my aesthetic, but also deliver the client's vision? And I'm used to putting like snakes and birds and monkeys and tigers in my work. And they were like, can you put local animals into the murals? And I was like, oh, sure, no problem. And so I just had to kind of sort of rearrange my ideas and kind of figure out how I could make that work in this really sort of minimal and soft palette. So yeah, I love the challenge of trying to meet someone's vision, but also keep the aesthetic of my work. Next slide. Sorry, I'm just kind of talking fast because I want to get through the slides. So I did this mural project right after Lululemon at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and I was given like free rein to do whatever I wanted, which was amazing. So I made it as bright as I wanted, as colorful, bold patterns, snakes, birds, you name it. It was all in there. And for this mural, I want to talk about how important representation in public institutions is. I would never have seen myself in these spaces when I was younger. And, you know, as an artist early into my career, I was able to transform the third floor rotunda in this space alongside an exhibition called Moving Still Performance Photography from India. And so it was the show whose work really resonated with me. And then another artist of color was given the opportunity to transform this space. And she told me that if she hadn't already seen my work in that space as a woman of color, she wouldn't have known if she would have been confident enough or felt like that space was inclusive for her to work in. And so that is the power of visibility and representation, you know, to be able to see our diverse voices in these spaces, you know. So I hope someone sees her work and then is inspired and confident enough to do something in that space in the future. Next slide. These are just some mural sites that I really, or mural Instagram accounts I really love. Extra Paint, it's run by muralists on Instagram, and Muralist gives a lot of great tips and tricks. And then they have a podcast talking to different muralists. And then Pander Design Co., they run Ladies Who Paint, and they're constantly giving so much information on their Instagram about how to work with clients, what not to do, what to do. They're a great resource. They're making multiple six figures in their careers. I believe they said they made $70,000 just in January this year. So they know what they're doing. And then these are a couple of feel good social impact mural Instagrams. The Aravani Art Project is run by transgender artists in India, and their hope is to basically, you know, highlight transgender artists, but also normalize being transgender and, you know, create a more equitable and peaceful society. And their work is amazing. And then another one at the top, Seb Toussaint, he is a French artist, and he travels around the world and he works with communities in slums and other refugee communities to brainstorm a word that defines their community or a word that's important to them. And he paints it onto the wall with these really beautiful, bright colored patterns. And sometimes the community members will help paint with him. And, you know, that's something I aspire to do with my mural practice. Next slide. And then I also do a lot of work that directly relates to my heritage. Stories for South Asian Supergirls is an amazing book created by Raj Kaur from the Pink Laddu Project. And the Pink Laddu Project basically promotes equity by breaking down sexist customs within my culture. And Raj Kaur came up with this idea to profile 50 women from India's past and present and hire 10 South Asian female illustrators to illustrate them. And so I got to illustrate 6 of these women and read their stories. And I just was like, wow, I wish this book had existed when I was growing up, because I didn't have this at my disposal. And, you know, I didn't see myself reflected in any mainstream media. And, you know, really, I internalized the effects of that underrepresentation and that erasure. You know, and now I get to be that change. Like, I get to be that person that can represent that change. And I get to be that role model to the younger generation that I never had. So, you know, these kinds of projects are just so important to me personally. Next slide. This was another incredible opportunity I had with Van Mural Fest. It was a special project. This building is a federal building, and it was named after Harry Stevens. And he was the minister, like the MP, that was really vocal in denying entry of the Komagata Maru passengers. So these passengers on the ship were just stuck in Burrard Inlet. They were denied entry into Canada because this MP and other politicians created laws to prevent them from docking. And this depicts the oral story of the Coast Salish people coming out to the ship and bringing supplies and sustenance for the passengers who were stranded. The South Asian portion of the mural was designed by Kirit Kaur and was painted by myself and Sanrup Kaur. So I did the Fukari pattern here, the geometric design. And I thought it was very cheeky of Van Mural Fest to put this mural on this federal building. And during the process of this painting, the building was officially denamed. There was a press conference right there in front of the mural, and the government officially denamed the building. So that is the power of art, right? You can make active change with art. Next slide. This is one of the most important projects in my career so far. It is called For Jyoti, and it is dedicated to Jyoti Singh, the young woman who was brutally assaulted on a bus in India in 2012 and died of her injuries. It was one of the most horrific things I'd ever read about. And it filled me with so much rage and so much anger that this could happen to a person. And the only reason this happened was because she was a woman. She was an independent woman. She showed agency over her life. And these people did not like it. These men did not like it. And they wanted to teach her a lesson. And I wanted to create something around her and something really powerful that would share her story in an empowering way. And I just felt like I had too much anger to tell it at that time. And I never want to share someone's story through a lens of anger because I don't think it would do the story justice. And so it took me 7 years to find the right time, place, and project to do this. It was with Facade Festival with Burrard Arts Foundation. I created a 5-minute animation with Bambi Edlund and projected it. It was projected onto the facade of the Vancouver Art Gallery, and it told the story of Jyoti Singh. And this very public platform in this very large scale way. And I felt so proud of the work because I feel like a lot of people learned about Jyoti Singh through it and, thought about, when we talk about violence in women. And yeah, it was just, and it was really important for me to really show it through a lens of empowerment and hope. I wanted it to be really hopeful because I am hopeful things can change. It just is going to take a lot of work. And that's a picture of Jyoti Singh's mom holding the candle. Since then, her rapists have all been executed. So her mom has found a sense of justice in all of this, but she'll never have her daughter back. So nothing can take that pain away. But yeah, like these projects are just, they're what drive me. They're what drive my practice. That's really at the crux of what I do. Next slide. So I was awarded an award, the Artistic Visionary Award from Darpin Magazine. It's a local South Asian magazine. And then the next year I was on their cover and they did a 6-page feature on me. And I really just felt so humbled and so grateful for the support from the South Asian community. I've really been embraced by my community and I've been receiving a lot of support. And it just makes me want to keep moving. A lot of young South Asian artists have reached out to me and, thank me for doing what I do because it gives them hope that they can do it too, and I mean, what more can I ask for? Next slide. So I just want to end by talking about residencies. I didn't really know what a residency was until I met Amy Henny Brown, who's an amazing artist. And she did a talk about all of these residencies that she's been in and gone to. And it just seemed like a great way to expand your practice, but I didn't really totally understand what a residency was. So in 2018, I was approached by Indian Summer Festival, which is an amazing festival. It's in its 11th year, run by Srish Rao and Laura, his wife. And so for India Summerfest, they do artist in residences every year. So I was there in 2018 and I did multiple projects with them. I created the visual imagery for the festival. So this goddess, which was then put into all of their branding materials, advertising materials, and I learned a lot through working with them and working on such different projects. And the thing I really loved about this was that I could work from home, but I was also in the office as well, working with them. And the space was completely open to my son. So I brought him with me every time I went, and he would just play with people that were in the office, or he'd have a space under the table he'd play in. And it just really, I felt really supported in being a mother and an artist because it wasn't an issue to bring my son with me, and it just made everything so much easier. Next slide. We're almost done, so just bear with me. So this is my recent show in residency. So in the fall of 2020, I started my 10-week residency with Burrard Arts Foundation. And I had 10 weeks to create a show, and it just ended last week. So I decided for this show that I wanted to turn the lens inward and actually tell my story. Because I focus so much on other women's stories, I wanted to tell my story, and my story around motherhood, but the dark side of motherhood, looking at darkness as mother's constant companion. And it was very therapeutic for me to be in the studio and have that time and space to myself to really explore these feelings, because I have some distance from it now with my son being in kindergarten, so I could speak more openly about it and more objectively. And you know, these beasts are me, the mother beast. Each pairing represents a feeling that I felt intensely during motherhood, and the monkeys are all of the monkeys are my son, and it's us interacting in those feelings. And really, I just wanted to create a space where we could talk about motherhood in particular, but parenthood, caregiving, openly, and you know, look at those ideas around maternal perfection and how we don't have that room to be imperfect or show weakness, and give people space to really feel the feelings and talk about those feelings, start a dialogue around those feelings instead of hiding everything. Next slide. This was a process wall that was in the show, and I added it last minute. On the Post-its have all of these feelings that I have around motherhood that I was very ashamed to put up in my studio. And I felt very uncomfortable putting them on the wall in the gallery, because again, I was afraid of judgment. I was afraid people would think I was a bad mother. But the response to this show was more than I could have ever asked for. I got so many messages from people, not just mothers, but you know, all kinds of people thanking me for laying my feelings bare and how much they resonated with those feelings and felt like they were finally seen for the first time. You know, and it's just, that's what I strive to do with my work. And then I was on the Artist Mother podcast, and again, it was received really well. And I got so many messages from mothers just being like, thank you for talking about this openly and honestly. And for me, you know, I like discomfort. I like talking about uncomfortable things, you know, in hopes that it will affect some kind of change. And then we're almost done. Next slide. So this is, I have an upcoming show at Surrey Art Gallery in October, and it was based off of an idea I had in 2016 called Hardcore, profiling women from India's past and present who I think have done really remarkable things. And so now I am bringing these women into the show, but I'm again talking about my personal experience. So we're going to go back to my teenage bedroom and think about, you know, how could my life have been different had I had these role models, or had I known about these role models in my life? Next slide. And the last, I want you to write your bucket lists. You know, I have these bucket lists in my brain where I'm like, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that. And I think about, well, how can I do that? What level does my art practice, or do I need to be at to do that thing? And these are just some examples of potential things on your bucket list. You know, I wanted to paint a mural with Van Mural Fest. I did it. I wanted to be the resident of India Summerfest. I did it. I wanted to have a show with Surrey Art Gallery. It's happening. I wanted a residency at Broad Arts Foundation. I did it. You know what I mean? So it's like, put it out there in the world so that you're thinking about it actively, and then start making the steps towards making it a reality and looking at what you need to do in order to get that thing. You know, because I never thought I could achieve those things, and now my bucket list is becoming like pretty high level. And you know, I want to strive to like hit that next point in my career, and then hit that next point in my career. So, you know, write down your bucket list and figure out what you want to do with your career, and what success looks like to you, because what success looks like to me is different from what success looks like to you. And then last slide, I think it's just thank you. Yes. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me blab about my work. As always, if you have any questions, we can answer them now. I'm more than happy to answer anything you're curious about.
All right. Well, thank you, Sandeep. That was great. Love seeing all your work. We haven't had questions, just praise of what beautiful work you have, and they loved your show, and thank you. But if anyone does have questions, now's your chance. So please toss them in either the Q&A or the chat.
Oh, sorry. While we're waiting, I wanted to mention one thing that I didn't mention in my rush to get through the slides, was something around language. When I was talking about Rest in Power at the beginning, I kept saying it's a show about 12 women whose deaths have impacted me deeply. But as I was saying it repeatedly, I realized, well, they didn't just die. They were actually murdered for being women. And, thinking about how language matters. And so, that term violence against women, I use it all the time. But recently, those quotes by Jackson Katz, he's an educator, have come up on social media quite a bit. And it's talking about how violence against women is such a passive term, right? There's no agent in that sentence. Nobody is doing it to them. It just happens to them, and so as I continue on with my practice, I have to hone in on the language that I use as well to really depict what I'm trying to say. And so I thought that was like an interesting thing.
Well, I think too, that speaks to just how invested you are in really finding your voice, and you don't just kind of do something and rest on your laurels and go, I'm just going to keep doing that same thing because it worked last time. Like, you do push yourself. And I think that's really important for all artists to think about is, you continue to investigate, you continue to, to drive your keep your passions moving forward, basically, and keep trying new things, which I think is something that really shows a lot in your work.
Yeah. And you have to push, because otherwise your practice will just remain stagnant. During the residency, I worked with textiles for the first time. I didn't want to just do something that was second nature to me. I wanted to push my practice further, and I was really happy with the result. And also, like, there's so much compromise and sacrifice that comes with having a professional art career, and I have very poor boundaries when it comes to work and life. My life is 24/7 art. And I know I need to create better boundaries, but I love what I do so much that I just want to do it all the time. But, there is a certain level of commitment that we need in order to succeed when it comes to art. And, like, I don't take vacations. There's a lot of things I don't do because it will impact my career. And I really need to just keep my career going until it gets to that place where I can kind of slow down a bit.
We did have one question come in.
Oh, sure.
What are some ways you find the courage to share so publicly the things that matter personally to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I personally don't feel uncomfortable talking about uncomfortable subjects. So for me, it's not a far stretch. But talking about the motherhood project, that was uncomfortable for me. But I just thought, well, you know what? If I'm constantly sharing other women's stories, I have to have the bravery and the vulnerability to share my own. But I think what's important with that is striking a balance between giving enough information, information that you're comfortable with, and not hitting anyone over the head with what you're trying to put out there. So no one likes to be lectured or yelled at. So my friend calls my work a quiet protest. Like, I have very strong feelings about all of these things, and I will rage out in my apartment at home. But when I present it to the world, it's a bit more constrained, and the aesthetics of the work is so important to me, to have those beautiful aesthetics to, like, pull the viewer in. And then once the viewer is in, they realize that there's something that's a bit unsettling about the work, and hopefully that'll force the viewer to investigate the work further. But only do what you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. And I think too, because your work works on so many levels. There is sort of, the initial aesthetics, that might draw someone in who isn't thinking about those issues at all. And I think that's, that's something that makes the work really strong. And in general, when work is political or socially aware or personal, I think having something else to bring the viewer in is also very important. Otherwise, the work does just kind of get stale, or like you said, hits you over the head.
For sure. Yeah.
Another question from Nina, very inspirational. Thank you very much. Could you please tell a bit about what a mentorship is like in practice? How do you find a mentor? I'm new to Canada and my goal is to make my own jewelry line, but would just like to know, I guess, how does that mentorship work in real life?
Yeah, so for me, it was timing. I mean, I just happened to be starting my career at a time when Thrive Art Studio was starting. And so for me, meeting Jamie, that was such a huge mentoring plus for me. I joined Thrive as a member. And then, just having access to different artists and all of those resources was super helpful. And then Penny Lane as my consultant, she consults with probably over 500 artists a year all over the world. I've developed a relationship with her over the past 5 years. And so, she knows me, she knows my practice, she knows what motivates me. And she's able to really help me kind of define what it is that I'm trying to say and how I can articulate it visually. So those, Jamie and Penny Lane have been my two biggest kind of mentors. And you can join Thrive online, and you can also book a consult with Penny Lane. Some people will join their own sort of mentoring groups. The Artist Mother podcast has mentoring groups for artist mothers. So there are different options online. And if you have something specific you want to ask me, you can just send me a message on Instagram.
Great. I do think the one sort of benefit of us working from home online more is there is a lot more access to online groups that you were speaking about. Like, there's, once you start searching, you should be able to find one that kind of either fits your practice or where you're at in your practice.
Yeah, for sure.
A very big question from Stella. Can Sandeep share how she works through feelings of judgment, please? I think every artist goes through this. So
yeah, that is a really good question. I grew up in a very critical, critical space, and South Asian community is very critical. So I've been fighting judgments my entire life. I had a very harsh inner critic, but I found the more I started making work and not worrying about the outcome, so that year that I was just drawing every day and honing my skills, when that critic would start creeping in, I would start being like, yeah, no, thank you. And just keep pushing that critic voice out of my head. And it takes work and time and practice. But, I think it's good to listen to what the critic is saying to you. Don't get attached to it. Right. So I would just objectively listen to what my critic would say to me. And I found that as soon as I stopped having an emotional response or attachment to it, I was able to start pushing it away. And that comes with confidence, though, because I've spent so much time building up my skill. And I feel very confident with my skills. And of course, there's other artists who I'm like, oh, I love their art. I want my art to be like that. I want it at that level. I want that career. That's my motivation to push and just keep pushing further. And not everyone's going to like your art. I mean, it's just a reality. As long as you have enough people who like your art, that's all that matters. And people who are important to you. Everyone else, it doesn't matter, So, I think a good way to work through those judgments is just listen to what those judgments are, and think about why you have them. And, if it helps to write them down, maybe that's something you can do. And I know sometimes people will make an image of their inner critic. It could be like some creepy monster or gremlin or something, and they name it. So, when the inner critic starts talking, they're like, okay, Joe, I don't really need that advice right now. So you're almost befriending your critic in a way. But yeah, I mean, you just believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself and believe that you have the ability to do this thing that you want to do, and really not worry about whether people are judging you or not. If that makes sense.
Yes, it totally does. Another question, how or if your parents' perspective of your career has changed?
Yes. It wasn't like my parents were like, don't be an artist. They were coming from a fear-based place as new immigrants to a new country of, we need to make sure our kids have better opportunities than we did, and we need to make sure they have secure and stable careers. That was their bottom line. So they always knew that I was an artist, you know, they knew it. And so when I went to art school, when I turned 30, I did not want to tell them because I was afraid of what they would say. And my mom was like, why can't you just get a job and stick with it? And I'm like, because I can't. And so, you know, I did it. They came to the grad show and they were very proud of me. But now that they're seeing this as an actual viable career where I'm making money, I'm succeeding, their perspective has changed. Like, they are very proud. They kind of understand it a bit better. They don't totally understand what I'm doing, but they understand that this is what I'm meant to do. And yeah, it's been really good. It's been a journey for sure.
Mm-hmm. I totally relate, since I also have immigrant parents who are pretty much sound very much the same. It does, you know, they still don't really know what I do, but that's okay.
Yeah, as long as they see that you're surviving and you're able to support yourself and you're relatively happy, you know.
Yeah. I don't see any more questions. I do see a lot of thank yous, and people learned a lot. They say it was a great presentation.
Okay.
I want to agree.
Sorry, I had to rush through it. I realized I had so many slides, so hopefully I got all the
No, it was great. I mean, it's kind, you know, like I said at the beginning, your career has just really been taking off. Like, you've been really busy these last few years, and it shows. And I look forward to seeing your show at Surrey Art Gallery.
Yeah, thank you.
It'll be nice to see all your work in a big space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, although I've seen it in very large walls,
Yeah.
outdoors, it'll be nice to see it in a really big space. Do you know when is that happening again?
I believe September 18th, but it's going to be my show, and then there's going to be space for some of my other work. So it'll have quite a few moving parts, which is exciting.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I look forward to it. So thank you, Sandeep, for joining us today. And thank you, everybody out there online who are watching us today and sending in your questions. I hope you enjoyed today's session as much as I did. I also want to thank my colleague, Melanie, who's been sitting beside me today, running everything behind the scenes for us. So just, you know, if there were any notes you needed from today's session or wanted to see past salons, this will be posted online soon. I'll clean up the transcription, include some links so that you can refer back to this at a later time. And again, that will be on the Richmond Art Gallery website. I hope you can join us next month. On April 24th, I'll be back with artist Rachel Rosinski, who's the current Branscombe House artist in residence, who, very similar to Amy Henny Brown, like you were talking about, has done a lot of residencies as part of her drawing practice. And we'll talk a lot about residencies for artists. So join us next month for that. Hope to see you back soon. And thank you for supporting our online programs. And thank you again so much, Sandeep, for being such a great guest.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Richmond Art Gallery. Thank you, everyone who joined in. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, reach out to me anytime.
Great. Well, thank you. So take care, everyone. Stay safe and hope to see you again soon.